I got a report saying someone had seen an old man pushing a child on a swing. The operator thought it was a prank, but the caller insisted. They swung all night without stopping. By the time they arrived, the little girl on the swing was already dead. The old man kept putting the little girl back on the swing over and over again and again. The little girl had been frightened to death. It was midnight when the report came in by the time he arrived at the scene. The little girl was still swinging back and forth on the swing, and the old woman silently pushed hard from behind. But there was no exchange between them. Only the mechanical creak of the swing could be heard. What had once been a very tender scene had become eerily strange. "Sir, please stop and cooperate with the investigation." My voice wasn't quiet, but the old man showed no expression, as if he hadn't heard. Something felt wrong. I hurried over and grasped the old man's slightly cold hand. The other colleagues took the opportunity to stop the swing, and only then did they see the little girl's face. His face was ashen, features contorted, as if he had been horribly frightened. The little girl's limbs were rigid. She had long since stopped breathing. At that moment, the old man beside us moved in a way that was hard to describe, strange and off. As if waking from a dream, he began cursing and muttering, trying to break free from my hold. "What are you doing? Why won't you let my granddaughter play on the swing?" A moment later, she muttered to herself, "It was bright just a while ago. How did it suddenly get so dark?" I couldn't help but wonder. It's midnight now, so how could it have been bright just a moment ago? She saw the little girl on the ground motionless, rushed over in a panic, held her body, slapped the girl's face while calling out, "Ting Ting, are you asleep? Ting Ting, wake up, don't scare Grandma." Seeing the little girl unresponsive, she sobbed loudly in panic. My granddaughter, oh, how will I explain this to your father? My colleague and I looked at each other. This person seemed to be the little girl's grandmother. The case was too bizarre, so we took her back to the station for questioning. The deceased's identity had been confirmed. Her name was Wendy, 10 years old, and she was the old woman's granddaughter. The exact cause of death would have to be confirmed by the medical examiner. I asked the old woman to tell in detail how it had happened, and she said, "This evening, I brought my granddaughter here to play on the swing. We had only been playing for a short while when you all came." As she spoke, she looked distraught and let two blurred tears fall. How did my granddaughter suddenly just go? I watched her every move carefully. She didn't seem like she was lying. But when she said she'd play for a while, she ended up playing for nearly 6 whole hours. I pondered it and thought the old woman before me might very well be mentally unwell. So, with the idea of confirming it, I asked her, "Do you know your granddaughter was on the swing for nearly 6 hours?" As expected, she listened and looked astonished. "What are you talking about? We clearly only played for half an hour." A bold guess popped into my mind. The old man might have dementia. She forgot the time, so she kept her granddaughter on the swing over and over again, until the granddaughter realized something was wrong and wanted the grandmother to stop. But the grandmother didn't react at all, and the girl was frightened to death on the swing. According to the informant, he went downstairs for a walk after dinner at 6 that evening and saw the old woman and the girl on the swing, hearing the girl laughing happily. This indicates that at that time the girl was not yet dead. When I returned, it was already 7 in the evening. I saw they were still playing and didn't think much of it. Until midnight, I went downstairs to buy a pack of cigarettes and saw the two of them still on the swings. By then the night was deep and quiet, the laughter and voices gone. That section of our housing complex didn't have a high occupancy rate. The scene began to turn horrifying, and he completely lost his composure. Terrified, he rushed home and chose to call the police. At that moment, Wendy's father, Richard, also arrived at the station. He looked like an honest, steady middle-aged man, his eyes red and swollen, as if he'd already cried. Somewhat awkwardly, he spoke. "Officer, this was an accident. My mom, she'll be okay, right?" Before I could ask more, he pulled out a psychiatric certificate. It showed that Wendy's grandmother, May, suffered from intermittent amnesia. As I suspected, this was most likely an accident. Only the old man knew that his granddaughter had died in such a way. He didn't know how to face it. Richard said his daughter had a congenital heart condition and couldn't handle too much shock. And when I asked, "Your wife and daughter didn't come home late at night. Why didn't you go look for them? He looked away, stammering. I went out drinking with friends tonight. It's my fault for drinking too much. As he spoke, he slapped his own face twice, putting on an exasperated expression. Before I even got close, I smelled the alcohol on him. I sighed. What an utterly irresponsible father. And the girl's mother was working away from home. The next day, the coroner's autopsy report came out. The report showed that Wendy's cause of death was cardiac arrest brought on by extreme fright. This matched my conclusion. It seemed it really was a tragic accident. So he sighed. This is cruel. If it were my family, I'd be miserable to death. But Coroner William disagreed. Whether you'd be miserable or not isn't so certain. I asked him what he meant. He sighed deeply, then continued. This little girl is sallow and thin, her hair brittle. It's caused by long-term malnutrition. If her family loved her, how could someone so young be malnourished? William took a sip of water and went on. There's another odd point. According to my tests, the girl's time of death was between 5 and 7 yesterday afternoon. You said the reporter first saw the 2 grandchildren at around 6 in the evening. But between 5 and 6, that 1-hour window, we don't know what those 2 were doing. I followed William's line of thought and said, do you mean that the girl might have died between 5 and 6 o'clock, that the swing wasn't the primary crime scene, and that she was moved there after her death? William nodded, but I dismissed his view without much thought. I patted his shoulder to show my apology. You make a reasonable analysis, but there's one thing I didn't tell you. The caller said around 6 o'clock that he heard the little girl laughing happily, which means she was still alive when she came onto the swing. William shrugged and smiled helplessly. I was overthinking it, but the case itself was already eerie. To be frightened to death while on a swing, even saying it out loud, sent chills down people's spines. If we didn't make the investigation airtight, I feared no one would be convinced. So I went back to the scene, canvassing nearby residents to find more witnesses. It was an old apartment block. Most of the residents were elderly. It was another stairwell apartment. Not many people came and went. Seeing a window in one unit that faced the swing, I went up and knocked on the door. An old man opened it. He lived there with his grandson. So I asked, Sir, excuse me, on September 7th that afternoon between 5 and 7, did you see anyone downstairs swinging on the swing? The old man waved his hand impatiently, indicating he hadn't seen anything. I felt a little disappointed and was about to leave. His grandson suddenly shot up his hand and shouted at me. Officer, why didn't you ask me? I saw it. I even recorded a video. I shuddered all over, turned around, and hurriedly asked him to bring it for me to see. The video was filmed at 6:02 p.m., lasting only a brief 30 seconds. I opened it and saw Wendy and her grandmother on the screen. The 2 of them were enjoying themselves. Though a little distant, I could still faintly hear Wendy's bright laughter. That was enough to show that Wendy died on the swing. It was an accident. After copying the video and returning to the station, I put it up on the big screen and watched it again. In the video, the swing moves too fast to make out Wendy's face. Only a blurred image and her clear, ringing laughter. I handed the video to a colleague in the technical department and asked him to restore it. The processed result made us break out in a cold sweat. After the video was restored, Wendy's face became clearer and even more terrifying, just like when we found her that night. Her mouth gaping, eyes wide open, features contorted, face deathly pale. She was clearly a corpse. Worse still, the footage kept replaying, Wendy's body on the swing seeming to come alive, emitting a chilling laugh that left one trembling with lingering fear. Why would a dead person laugh? Something had to be wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Feeling a little irritable, I went outside to get some fresh air. Beside me was a kindergarten, and quite a few children were swinging on the swings. Laughter and shrieks filled the air. It made me think of Wendy again, and I couldn't help but watch quietly for a while. Suddenly, there was a boom in my head. I knew where the problem lay. The laughter in the video was in the wrong place. Children on swings at kindergarten share a common trait. They only scream or laugh sharply when the teacher pushes them upward. On the return swing, they don't make those sounds. But in the footage obtained during the inquiry, Wendy was heard screaming multiple times while the swing was coming back. There is only one explanation. The voice in the video is fake. Wendy's grandmother is lying. I fetched Wendy's grandmother's phone. It was an old smartphone, a model from 10 years ago, already painfully slow, tap a screen, and you had to wait ages for response. In her photo gallery were several videos of Wendy on the swing, their image quality strikingly clear. I copied them one by one and had the technicians compare them with the audio from that 30-second interview video. Sure enough, the audio in that 30-second clip came from one of the videos on Grandma Wendy's phone. She was pushing the swing with one hand while loudly playing an old video of her granddaughter swinging from the phone. When passers-by heard the laughter, they'd mistakenly think Wendy was still alive. Besides, it was getting late then, and the swing kept moving, so you couldn't make out anyone's face. After the witness had passed, she turned the video off. When we questioned a witness, he would naturally conclude that the girl was still alive on the swing, thereby misleading the police. If it weren't for that video obtained during the interviews, she would have nearly gotten away with it. This old woman looked clumsy, yet her thoughts were so delicate. She hardly seemed like someone with amnesia. But why would she do this? If she really had been the one to cause the child's death, there would have been no need at all to go to the trouble of placing her granddaughter on the swing. I thought it over carefully. If she acted like that, it was likely to hide the real crime scene. Maybe Winnie didn't die by accident at all, but was murdered. Winnie's grandmother was covering it up for someone. And who could make an old woman willingly take the blame for murder? The person who came to mind was her son, Richard. I went to the interrogation room and questioned Wendy's grandmother, May, again. I put that video in front of her and said bluntly, "You didn't kill your granddaughter. Why are you lying?" When she saw it, her expression changed drastically. She looked very uneasy and couldn't stop trembling all over. I struck while the iron was hot and warned her sternly. Taking the fall for someone else still makes you criminally liable. I advise you to confess now. Don't sacrifice yourself. Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed uncontrollably, her psychological defenses on the verge of collapse. So I hurriedly asked her, "Who are you covering for?" She was very agitated, sobbing for a long time, but no matter how I tried to lead her, she simply wouldn't speak. After calming down, she returned to a look of cold indifference. "I was careless and caused my granddaughter's death. I'm not covering for anyone." I slapped the table hard in fury. It buzzed under my hand. Now the case had shifted. The focus of the investigation fell on Richard. May refused to speak, so we had to try breaking through from other angles. Just then, the rest of the team came up with a new discovery. At about 5:20 that afternoon, Richard's account had received a transfer of 100,000 yuan. Winnie's time of death can now be fixed between 5 and 6 that afternoon, which makes that transfer very suspicious. So my colleagues from a trace inspection team and I drove over to Richard's house. This is very likely the scene of the first incident. He looked at me, seeming a little panicked and at a loss. He anxiously wiped his hands on his clothes, reached out to shake mine, and began to speak. "Officer, why are you here? By the way, will my mom be released? She shouldn't be going to jail, right?" This person wasn't as honest as he looked, and I didn't give him a friendly face. His right hand froze midair, then awkwardly pulled back. "Mind your own business first. Tell me where you were between 5 and 6 o'clock the night of the incident." He answered without hesitation, "I'm at home." Then, as if thinking of something, he wore an expression of disbelief. "You wouldn't be accusing me of having killed my own daughter, would you?" He was the one who pierced that thin veil himself. I ignored his question and kept asking him, "Who can vouch for you?" He said, "My wife and my mother can both testify for me. My wife and I were at home talking at the time." This is impossible. How could I kill my own daughter? Even a tiger won't eat its cub. Do I look like something worse than a pig or a dog? Thinking of the coroner saying Wendy had suffered long-term malnutrition, I wanted to say he really was something worse than a pig or a dog. But the police's professionalism kept me from acting on impulse. I could only curse inwardly. When contacting the family after the incident, Richard had clearly said his wife was working out of town. But now he claimed his wife had been at home on the day of the incident. Could he really be unaware of his own wife's whereabouts? Or was it to cover something up? He explained, "My wife, after seeing me, said she was going out to work. I asked again, "What did you talk about at the time?" Richard rolled his eyes. "Just talking about the kids' studies. Her mother works away from home and only comes back once in a while. If they really cared about their daughter's schooling, they wouldn't have let her get so thin and yellow from hunger." It seemed he wouldn't speak properly unless I hit him with something shocking. A sly gleam was in his eyes. I stared into them and said earnestly, "What about that 100,000 transfer?" When he heard it, his face went ashen and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. His voice trembled a little. "My wife is divorcing me, and that 100,000 yuan was her child support for our daughter." According to him, he and his wife were in the midst of a divorce, and his wife didn't want to raise the child. I asked him again, "Why doesn't your wife want to raise her?" He seemed very indignant. What other reason could there be? That bitch has someone on the side. These are only his one-sided words. Their truthfulness remains to be further investigated. I walked a circuit through his home. It was an old two-bedroom apartment with a living room. The inner room belonged to Richard, the outer one to his mother, May. I asked Richard, "Where does her daughter live?" He hesitated and mumbled, "With her grandmother." But when I stepped into her grandmother's room, I didn't see any of Wendy's belongings. So I turned to Richard with a dark face and said, "Who exactly does she live with?" Richard's eyes darted away. He couldn't bring himself to look me in the face. He rubbed his hands, pointed to a corner of the living room, then lowered his head. I went over. There was a folding bed there and a small table the size of a bedside cabinet. On the table, a neat stack of school books was arranged. On the wall hung a hook, and on it a worn little backpack. It looked like there were quite a few books inside, heavy with weight. So I took one down and opened it. There weren't any books in the backpack. It was packed full of ripe mangoes. Wendy didn't have her own room. This was her room. There was a small drawer in the middle of the little table, and inside it lay a single delicate notebook. This seemed to be Wendy's most precious possession. I casually opened to a page, and to my surprise, it was Wendy's diary. September 6th. My deskmate Henry is so annoying. Today he brought a huge mango, about half the size of my face. He said his aunt bought it for him, 20 quiet Jean. He took a bite, said the mango was bad, and casually got ready to throw it away. But I've never eaten a mango in my life. So I took it and said I'd help him tell if it was bad. I bit into it. It was soft and limp. So this is what a mango tastes like, so fragrant, so sweet. But I had to pretend I'd eaten it. I took 2 bites and then threw it away. Then, with faint assurance, I told Henry that it really was rotten. After he left, I secretly picked the mango back up and started eating it again. He happened to see me and laughed loudly, saying, "Wendy, have you never eaten a mango?" Suddenly the whole class surged around to watch. They all began to mock me. "Wendy's never even eaten a mango, haha." My face flushed red. I almost cried, and I argued loudly, "Of course I have." They said they didn't believe me. I told them, "I'll bring it for you to see tomorrow." Mom said she'd come to see me tomorrow, and then I'll have her buy me mangoes. I finished reading the entire notebook and couldn't calm down for a long time. I treated it as evidence and put it into my bag. This Richard is very suspicious, but right now there's no concrete evidence pointing to him. The forensics colleagues found nothing of value at his house either. Wendy died of cardiac arrest brought on by fright. There were no wounds on her body, and the scene wouldn't have left many clues to begin with. If she died at home, then the key to solving the case is to find the real reason she was frightened. Wendy was not welcomed at home. The preference for sons over daughters still persisted. But what puzzled me was this. If they disliked this daughter, why hadn't the couple, after so many years, chosen to have more children? In families that favor sons, a younger brother with 3 or 4 older sisters is not uncommon. Yet Wendy was an unwelcome only child. According to Richard's statement, Wendy's mother was also at the scene that night. In the days since her daughter's death, she hasn't been seen once. Leaving Richard's house, we went straight to Wendy's mother's residence. To our surprise, her mother lived in an upscale housing estate in the county. She had barely knocked when a neatly dressed middle-aged woman came to open the door and ushered us in. As if she had known we would come all along. She led me to the living room sofa and told my colleagues and me to sit wherever we liked. She spoke with polite courtesy. "Hello, officer. My name is Grace. I'm Wendy's mother." At that moment, a boy of about 10 suddenly appeared in the room and acted cute with her. "Auntie, I've finished my homework. Hurry up and take me to the playground to play." Grace turned her head, her face full of affection. "Henry, 你自己先去玩会儿，阿姨一会儿就来。"这个名字有点熟悉，我于是问了一句, "What's his name?" Grace answered, "Henry." I nodded thoughtfully. Grace lives in this upscale neighborhood, yet the boy had just called her Aunt Grace. This house was obviously not hers. Returning to the case, I lifted my cup, took a sip of tea, and asked Grace, "Your daughter died. Why didn't you go see her?" She looked mortified. She thought for a moment and said, "People are dead. What use is it to look?" It sounded callous, but it made a kind of sense. I kept a blank expression and continued to question her. "Where were you between 5 and 6 that afternoon, on the day of the incident?" She didn't think twice and answered, "I was at Richard's that day, discussing our divorce with him." This matched Richard's testimony as well. I asked her to be more specific about what they had talked about. She was silent for a moment, then said, "I told him I wanted a divorce, and he refused. I told him I would leave with nothing and would also give an additional $100,000 as child support for my daughter, and that the daughter would stay with him. He said he would agree if I transfer the money to him now, so I transferred 100,000 yuan to him. The reason Grace didn't want her daughter was probably that she now had a new family, and that daughter had become a burden to her. She intended to sever ties with her forever. That she was willing to leave with nothing was probably because she had been at fault for an affair, and besides, her current family's financial situation was fairly good. And then, he's a scoundrel. After taking the money, he went back on his word and said it wasn't enough. He wanted 200,000. Of course I refused. He's that kind of petty man. I was so furious I left on the spot. In Richard's statement, he made no mention of this matter. I lifted my head and stared into her eyes. "When did you leave?" She seemed a little uneasy under my gaze and answered in an uncertain tone. "Around 5:30, I guess." "When you left, where was Wendy?" "She was in the living room doing her homework." If what Grace said was true, then Wendy's time of death could be pinned down to that 30-minute window between 5:30 and 6 o'clock. "Do you know how Wendy died?" After I finished speaking, I stared at her without blinking, fixedly watching her. She grew a little nervous under my gaze and unconsciously touched the jade pendant at her chest. Her lips trembled, words on the verge of escaping, but she stopped. At that moment, her phone suddenly chimed once, as if she'd received a message. She picked it up to glance at it, then immediately put it down. Her expression returned to normal, and she looked at me with bafflement. My daughter wasn't killed on the swing by that crazy woman of hers, the grandmother? I shook my head. "Then how did my daughter die?" she asked in a voice that betrayed no confidence, even a touch of guilt. I glared at her in anger, then stood up and left. On the way back, a colleague told me that Richard had just transferred the 100,000 back. I glanced at the time of the transfer. It was exactly when I was questioning Grace about the crucial details of Wendy's cause of death. I went back to check and found that just now at Grace's house was that little boy named Henry. As expected, he was Wendy's desk mate and had appeared many times in Wendy's diary. Looking at the diary in front of me, I felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Suddenly, one entry in it caught my attention. Wendy wrote in her diary that on the morning of the incident her mother had taken her to the park to swing and had filmed many videos of her. My mind felt like it had been struck by electricity. I seemed to have missed a very important detail. Wendy's grandmother would rather have her sleep on a folding bed in the living room than let her granddaughter share a room with her. So how could she possibly have taken her to the park to swing? That doesn't make sense. So where did the swing video on Grandma, Wendy's phone, come from? There's only one answer. It was Wendy's mother. She transferred the video from her own phone onto Grandma, Wendy's phone. I should have thought of it when I was rifling through Grandma, Wendy's phone. Her grandma used an old smartphone from 10 years ago. Phones back then generally had low-resolution cameras. How could it possibly have filmed such a high-definition video? So Wendy's mother was involved in the whole affair. Not only did she know the truth, she might even have been the real killer who caused Wendy's death. Thinking of that, I couldn't help burning with anger and feeling that Wendy had been wronged. The next day, with a tangle of emotions, I decided to go see Grace again. When I saw her this time, she was noticeably cooler, a little more impatient written on her face. "Officer, I've already told you everything I could yesterday," I said to her with absolute certainty. "You are lying." She turned her head away and didn't make a sound. I was angry not because Grace had hidden something, but because she had betrayed a sincere heart. Wendy is a burden to all of you, but in her eyes, you are her whole world. Grace stood frozen, as if she didn't understand why I would say such a thing. I took out that thin yet weighty diary from my bag and solemnly handed it to Grace. She took it, a look of familiarity crossing her face as she murmured, "Isn't this the notebook I gave to my Henry?" Then she turned to the first page. April 5th. I was so happy today. My deskmate Henry gave me a pretty notebook. He accidentally dropped the notebook on the ground, and its cover got a bit splashed with dirty water. He no longer wanted it, so he gave the notebook to me. But it was beautiful. April 30th. Henry's aunt bought him new clothes again. He bragged to me that they cost 500 yuan. My clothes, 50 yuan, can buy 2 pieces. In summer, I only have 2 outfits, and I alternate wearing them. If the weather is bad and the clothes don't dry, I just have to wear them one more day. But I'm not envious of him, because my clothes were bought by my mother. She works away from home. Earning money must be very hard. May 9th. After school today, I saw Henry's father coming to pick him up again. There was an aunt on the bus who looked a lot like my mother. But my mother works away from home. How could she be on a bus? I thought about my mother. June 1st. Today is Children's Day, and we have a half day off in the afternoon. I returned home, but Dad and Grandma were both gone. They went out to a wedding and forgot me, only coming back the next day. I slept in the hallway all night. The next day, I woke up dizzy and hungry, but I didn't dare tell Dad. I cannot afford to be sick. June 20th. Henry gave me lots of snacks to eat. He said his aunt bought him all those imported snacks. He couldn't finish them, and they went past their expiration dates. The taste was a bit odd, but still delicious. September 7th. Today is the happiest day of my life, because Mom came to see me. This morning, Mom took me to the park to play on the swing, and she even took lots of videos of me. I used to not be able to swing by myself, but with Mom here today, I flew so high. Mom also took me shopping for clothes. I told Mom, "I have 2 sets of clothes, it's enough." I actually said that on purpose. I knew Mom would definitely buy me something. Yesterday, I promised a classmate I'd bring a mango to school. I didn't dare ask Mom to buy the mango outright. I was afraid she'd be upset. That's why I said that. After a while, Mom did ask me, "So what do you want to eat?" Hearing that, I felt like jumping for joy. I quickly told her I wanted mangoes. I'm such a little clever one. Mom really did take me to buy mangoes, 10 yuan for 5 jean. I didn't want Mom to spend too much, so we bought the slightly dark, discounted ones. Back home, I stuffed them all into my backpack. When school starts, I'll hand them out to my classmates. 1 for each person and 2 left over. 1 for Dad, 1 for Grandma. They'll never laugh at me again. When I grow up, I'll make lots and lots of money. That way Mom wouldn't have to go out to work anymore, and she could be with me every day. After finishing the whole diary, Grace felt utterly drained, as if she might collapse. She stumbled and barely kept her balance. I caught her reflexively and helped her over to the sofa. My voice was a little choked. Wendy in her life received no affection from her father, no love from her grandmother. She was easily satisfied. Just a little sweetness could fill her heart. You were the one who once gave her that small bit of sweetness, and you were the person she was closest to in this world. If after her death you can't even give her justice, then why did you choose to bring her into this world? Grace broke down, crying with a heart-wrenching intensity. "My dear daughter, I'm so sorry. I truly deserve to die." She finally agreed to speak, to tell the final truth. Grace's account. After Richard and I married, we never had children. Later we went to the hospital and found out it was his problem. His mother cared more about appearances than anything and didn't want people gossiping. So she came up with a rotten idea. One day, his mother mysteriously brought me a bowl of soup and said it was for conceiving a child. I didn't believe in such things, but Richard was urging me to drink it. Reluctantly, I drank it down. After I finished, She took me to a small inn where a strange man was waiting for me. She closed the door after going in, and I understood what she meant in an instant. After that, I became pregnant. His mother said that soup had been specially sought out, and it worked miracles. Drink it before you act, and when the baby comes, it will surely be a big fat boy. Who knew that when the day of birth came, I delivered a daughter? From then on, the whole household was thrown into chaos. He resented his mother, and his mother resented me. In the end, all the family's bitterness was poured onto the daughter. Because of the arrival of that daughter, misfortune came to the household. Afterward, I went out to work. I didn't want to stay in that house for even a moment. Who would have thought, a year later, I ran into the man from the Little Inn that day. His name was Victor. That day, he was driving a car that looked quite luxurious, and he recognized me at once. He said that, actually, the first time he saw me, he fell in love with me. Only at that time his wife was still alive, and because of society's pressure, he couldn't be with me. Now his wife has passed away. He wanted to renew our relationship. Richard and I had long been a marriage in name only. Divorce was only a matter of time, so without much thought, I moved back in with him. I had thought it was fate. The girl, Wendy, was his biological daughter too, so we could bring her over and finally be a real family. I didn't expect him to refuse so flatly. He said, "She's nothing but a bad omen. Think about it. After she was born, your family fell apart. My wife got sick and died not long after, and my business went downhill for 2 years. Someone like that, how could you still dare to bring her into the family? Besides, I already have a son now. You should try to get along with him. If you want another child, we can have one later. As for this one, forget it. She's a girl. Bad luck." I had no choice. I could only choose to abandon her. This county is small. It didn't take long for them to find out about my being together with Victor. That day, I went to see Richard to get a divorce. He and his mother were adamantly against it, convinced it would make them lose face. It wasn't until I said I wouldn't take a penny, would leave with nothing, and even give him 100,000 yuan in child support that he softened. But after he took the money, he reneged and demanded 200,000. I was furious. As I left, I humiliated him a little. "You've got nothing. You're not worth a single hair of Victor. Your wife ran off with someone else, and you end up raising another man's daughter." After a few steps, I suddenly heard my daughter scream, "Mama, I'm scared." I ran back at once and saw that madman Richard straddling my daughter, one hand tearing at her clothes. His eyes were bloodshot. Like a beast, he kept muttering, "If you sleep with my wife, I'll sleep with your daughter." By the time I pulled him away, my daughter was already without breath. She had been scared to death by Richard. I was trembling all over with fear, fumbling for my phone to call the police. Richard stared at the body before him, and when he came to his senses, he realized he had gotten himself into serious trouble. He snatched my phone away, fell to his knees, and begged me not to call the police. He said, "As long as you don't call the police, I will never bother you again. I'll agree to a divorce immediately." At that time, my mind was in turmoil. I didn't know what to do. He saw my hesitation and said to me again, "Isn't it better that she's dead? Haven't you noticed? Every misfortune of ours began after she came along. Now that she's gone, isn't it better for each of us?" I was possessed by a madness. I actually didn't choose to call the police. I admit I was selfish. What I thought then was, once she's gone, it would be as if all conflicts vanished in an instant. Everything would be better. Richard also had something on me. He wouldn't dare come and bother me. I could start a whole new life. But now the body was right here, and if the police investigated, they'd still find out. So I gave him an idea. His mother suffered from intermittent amnesia. It all began with her, so having his mother take the blame was most fitting. For years, Richard had harbored resentment toward his mother, blaming her for the ill-conceived scheme she came up with back then. Her mother felt guilty too, and without hesitation agreed. I put the video I had shot that morning of my daughter on the swing into her phone. I told her, "You take my daughter on your back, go to the community swings, then start playing the video out loud. Stop the video only after someone passes by and sees it. Don't stop swinging until the police arrive." She said to her again, "When the police ask, pretend you've lost your memory. Say you don't remember anything. It won't be long before they'll let you go. I think that when it's all over, all of us can be reborn. As if she had never come, as if nothing had happened. When Grace finished speaking, she kept slapping her own face, until blood welled at the corner of her mouth. She kept murmuring, "I'm not a person. I have failed my daughter." Shortly after Grace's confession, Richard also admitted his crime. He said that day Wendy ran into his room, holding a mango, and cheerfully said to him, "Daddy, eat a mango, it's so sweet." Richard saw the smile on Wendy's face, so much like her mother's. He took it as mockery. Hatred instantly clouded his vision. The phrase May said most often in prison was, "If only it had been a boy then." Wendy's life was lived as if treading on thin ice. Her birth seemed to carry original sin. No one liked her. When Wendy died, it was as if everyone was instantly relieved. Richard no longer had to raise someone else's daughter. May no longer had to live under her son's resentful cries. Grace no longer had to worry about her daughter affecting her new family. They both felt they would have a bright future. Except Wendy. She was like a weed, gone and gone. In a corner where no one cared, with no shelter, growing against the wind, she still couldn't wait out and reach the spring that belonged to her. 1. End of text.